No one in the bank saw what was about to happen. Not the teller, distracted by the ATM screen. Not the security guard sipping coffee while leaning against the wall. Not even the manager, smiling as he held a financing brochure. But Henry saw it. He saw it because his eyes had been trained to notice these things, even if he kept trying to forget. The first sign was how the three men walked in, too far apart to be friends, yet too coordinated to be strangers. The second was their bulky jackets, completely out of place in Cheyenne's dry August heat. The third, and most alarming, was the jittery look on the youngest one's face, like someone trying to summon courage in his own reflection before crossing a line. The first shout sliced through the room with the sharpness of lightning through glass. One of the men raised his gun and ordered everyone to get on the floor. The floor became a refuge, but not for Henry, and not for Lily, still clutching his hand tightly. 5 days earlier, Henry Calhoun was on his weekly walk through the open fields surrounding his house, 15 minutes from downtown Cheyenne. His pace was slow but steady. The wooden cane he used seemed more like a conversation partner than a crutch. At 72, he carried the weight of someone who'd seen more than he wished he had. After leaving the army, he chose a life well below the radar. No social media, no interviews, no veteran reunions. Just a quiet, simple life with his granddaughter Lily, who had become his entire world. Lily was 8, with a peculiar love for painting rocks. She said each one held a secret that needed color to be revealed. Henry would laugh at her ideas, and he didn't laugh often, maybe because part of him was always on alert, even when there was no reason to be. At least, not yet. That Tuesday, the plan was simple. Cash his pension check at the central bank, then take Lily for a milkshake at the corner stand, just like he'd promised. He wore his old blue plaid shirt, a pair of faded jeans, and his worn-out brimmed hat. Lily hopped beside him, her school backpack slung over one shoulder. Everything felt normal, until Henry felt that old chill again, the kind of feeling that's impossible to explain, but instantly recognizable. His eyes locked with a man standing near the door, then another, by the water cooler, and a third, who seemed to be silently counting the steps to the entrance. When the guns came out, it was 2:12 p.m. Time stopped for just a moment. Lily let out a frightened gasp, and Henry, knees aching and body aged, saw the world again through the lens of a tactical map. If this story already got under your skin, hit that like button and subscribe, because what comes next is even more intense. His first instinct was to protect Lily, but the panicked crowd had already scattered like spilled water on a slick floor. Screams, cries for help, and the sound of a gun slamming into a chair all blurred together into a deafening haze inside Henry's mind. Before he could process it, his granddaughter had been swept away in the chaos, now on the other side of the room, near the counter. The youngest of the robbers passed right by her without noticing. She crouched down, trembling, eyes wide, searching for her grandfather. That was the moment Henry stopped being just Henry Calhoun. His body straightened, as if something long buried had suddenly awakened. His mind, despite years of trying to adapt to a normal life, began scanning distances, calculating trajectories, anticipating reactions. He had no weapon, no armor, just himself, and the remnants of the warrior he used to be. 16 years earlier, Henry had been known in military circles as Echo Bravo, one of the most feared names in an elite urban operations unit during the Gulf War. He specialized in hostage rescues, tactical interrogation, and silent infiltration. He'd completed missions in countries that no longer even exist on today's maps. His last op, in Basra, nearly cost his entire team their lives and came dangerously close to turning into an international scandal. Back then, Henry had questioned his superiors. Big names. The mission involved a civilian contact who was later revealed to be involved in arms trafficking. But for the government, it was easier to bury the truth, and the team along with it. His retirement came sooner than expected, and he accepted it, because by then, he had already lost too much. His daughter, Lily's mother, had died months earlier in a tragic accident. Taking care of his granddaughter became his final mission. Back in the bank, Henry crawled between the bodies lying on the floor, trying to find a line of sight. One of the robbers, the most aggressive one, was yelling for the vault codes. Another was pacing among the hostages, waving his gun erratically, clearly nervous. The third, calmer, stood by the door, keeping watch. They were all young, all unprepared, but still dangerous. Lily remained crouched behind the counter, unseen. What no one in that bank knew was that Henry still had his reflexes. Not as fast as before, maybe, but sharp, measured, and honed by years of surviving chaos. He knew he wouldn't get a second chance, and if he didn't act, he could lose the only thing still keeping him going. He slid over to the side of the counter and spotted one of those chained security pens still attached. It wasn't a weapon, but it would do as a distraction. He tossed it across the room with a loud clatter. Instantly, the nervous one turned his head. Henry rose and charged. Using the full weight of his body, he slammed the young man into a desk. The gun flew from his hands. The second robber turned just in time to see his partner pinned, his arm locked in a bone-snapping hold. He rushed toward Henry but was met with a swift sweep to the legs, followed by a sharp throw that sent him crashing into an acrylic divider. That left only the third, the leader, still standing, still holding his weapon, but frozen. Not out of fear of being arrested, but because of the way Henry moved. This wasn't a civilian having a breakdown. This was someone who had done this before, and lived to tell the tale. Henry knew he couldn't miss. One wrong move and Lily, and everyone else, could be in danger. But in that moment, everything boiled down to a single look. His look, one that said, "It's already over," and the young man felt it. He turned to run for the door, but before he could cross the threshold, he was tackled by two outside security officers who had quietly called the police. The robbery was over, but for Henry, it was only the beginning. He ran to Lily. She threw her arms around him, her face soaked in tears but her voice steady. "I knew you'd find me." And without thinking, he answered, "I always will." What Henry didn't know was that every move he made had been caught on the security cameras, every strike, every glance. And within 24 hours, his face would be all over the internet, the evening news, and military forums. The man they thought was long retired had just stepped back into the spotlight, and with him came all the secrets some had hoped would stay buried. The video was posted at 6:48 the next morning. A quick, shaky montage made from short clips pulled from the bank's internal security feed. The title, "Grandpa Warrior Takes Down Armed Robbers in 15 Seconds." In less than an hour, it had thousands of views. By noon, national networks were airing it on repeat, with experts debating whether it was self-defense, a military-style intervention, or just a surge of adrenaline. But for those who knew Henry, or rather those who once knew Echo Bravo, there was no doubt. The way he moved, the precise elbow lock he used to neutralize the biggest attacker, that look, that was pure tactics, elite training, and that kind of skill doesn't vanish with age. It just goes dormant until something wakes it up. That same day, while Henry was flipping pancakes for Lily and doing his best to ignore the phone buzzing with notifications, a discreet email landed in the inbox of the Department of Retired Military Affairs. Subject, "Visual Confirmation, Echo Bravo." The sender was Nora Bennett, a field analyst and former strategic intelligence officer, now retired but still holding clearance to access classified files due to her years coordinating joint operations. The moment she saw the footage that morning, she froze. She hadn't seen Henry Calhoun since the end of Operation Coyote Dust, a mission that nearly cost both of them their lives. Back then, she was in charge of mapping infiltration routes, managing extraction points, and, most importantly, protecting the identities of operatives who had seen too much. Nora called a number she hadn't dialed in over 10 years. On the other end, a mechanical voice answered with a verification code. After a brief silence, she said just one thing: "Echo Bravo has resurfaced." The man hung up without a word, but she knew what that meant. If Henry was active again, something was wrong. Or worse, something had been reactivated. Back in Cheyenne, Henry tried to keep things normal. He dropped Lily off at school like always, stopped by the market, and returned home as if nothing had changed. But he felt it, the pressure on his shoulders, that kind of tension that settles in when the air starts to shift, even without a breeze. To everyone else, he was just the grandfather who had protected his little girl with remarkable bravery. But he knew it wasn't just that. The scent of gunpowder still lingered in his memory. And more than that, there was something about one of the robbers' faces that he couldn't shake. A tattoo on the young man's neck, a strange insignia. It looked eerily similar to the emblem Henry had seen years ago, on the side of a smuggled crate, intercepted during that disastrous mission in the Gulf. That night, once Lily was fast asleep, Henry retrieved a locked wooden box hidden beneath the floorboards of his backyard workshop. Inside, along with old letters, were documents that should have never left the military base. Maps from Black Ops, records tied to false identities, and a list of names that had once been blacklisted as traitors, and one of those names was now resurfacing. That robbery wasn't random. It was a trigger, a message. When Nora knocked on the back porch door, Henry was already there, waiting with 2 mugs of hot coffee. No words were spoken at first. They just stared at each other, the kind of gaze that doesn't just recognize a person, but the years they lost. "You were supposed to stay invisible," she said. "So were you," he replied. She pulled out her phone and showed him a still from the video. "Do you even realize what you've awakened?" Henry sighed. "Maybe it's not about what I woke up, but what never went to sleep." Nora handed him a folder, fresh intel. The tattooed robber was tied to an active criminal cell in Nevada. But deeper digging revealed connections to something much older. A weapons tech diversion scheme from the U.S. occupation in the Middle East. Something Henry had thought was long dead. He was wrong. The connection was alive, and more dangerous than ever. "They weren't at that bank by accident," she explained. "You're back on the radar, Henry, and that changes everything." He lowered his eyes, glancing toward Lily's bedroom window. She was still sound asleep, clutching her stuffed bear, unaware that her world was about to change forever. From that moment on, Henry knew. It wasn't about him anymore. It was about protecting her. And if that meant stepping out of the shadows and facing the men he'd spent a lifetime trying to forget, then so be it. But before he could respond to Nora's offer, the sharp screech of tires cut through the night. A car stopped right in front of the house, headlights blazing. A figure stepped out slowly, holding something in their hands. The past wasn't going to wait for his answer. It had already arrived. Henry didn't move a muscle, not when the figure stopped on the sidewalk with the headlights casting a harsh glow across the porch. Not even when Nora subtly slipped her hand beneath her coat where her Glock was hidden. The silence stretched like a steel wire, taut and ready to snap. Then the silhouette lifted what he was carrying. A box. Old, dark wood. Henry recognized it before even seeing what was inside. It was a message, a kind of code shared between veterans of Shadow Ops. Receiving an object from a past mission meant only one thing. "We know where you are, and this is personal." The box was placed gently on the ground. The man walked back to the car. No rush, no glance back. The vehicle turned around and vanished into the dark. Inside the box was a worn-out holster, a broken medal, and a photo of the Bravo Charlie team, taken in Iraq back in 1995. And there, among the faces frozen in time, one detail punched Henry in the gut. His own face had been crossed out with a red line. On the outside of the box, scrawled in shaky handwriting, were the words, "You should have stayed dead." The message was clear. This wasn't just about stolen tech or settling old scores. This was vengeance. Nora knew this changed everything. They weren't just being watched. They were being hunted. "If they're using this kind of signal," she said, "then they're not afraid of covering their tracks anymore." This just got personal. Henry stood and headed to the garage. A wall covered in tools and scrapwood concealed a safe built into the concrete. He entered a code he hadn't used in 10 years. Inside were 2 compartments, one holding false documents, and the other, his emergency cache, handgun, extra ammo, tactical flashlight, and a military watch that had stopped ticking after his final mission. Henry looked at the cracked display and muttered, "Time to come back." The next day, he didn't take Lily to school. Told her it was a holiday and that she could paint as many rocks as she wanted. While she played in the yard, Henry and Nora worked on a plan. Step 1 was to disappear from Cheyenne without drawing attention. Henry no longer trusted any official channel. If the enemy had already tracked him down to his doorstep, it meant they likely had eyes on strategic points all across the city. The solution was simple and old school. Vanish off the grid. And he knew just the place. A cabin in the Bighorn Mountains, inherited from his father. Remote. No electricity. No phone service. Fresh mountain water. And enough supplies to last for weeks. That night, they left without a sound. The vehicle of choice was the old pickup truck belonging to their elderly neighbor, the one Henry had fixed up for her more times than he could count. She happily lent it, believing the story he told her. Taking my granddaughter fishing. But this wasn't a fishing trip. It was an escape. Nearly 6 hours later, just before sunrise, they reached the cabin. Lily was still asleep, curled up in the back seat. When she woke up, they were surrounded by towering pines and the soft murmur of a distant stream. "Is this where you used to come with Mom?" she asked. Henry nodded. "Yeah, and now it's where we're going to lay low for a little while." In the days that followed, Henry transformed the place as if he were preparing a base of operations. Nora mapped out access routes, pinpointing likely interception zones. Henry taught Lily how to respond to certain sounds, how to hide, how to stay calm. She thought it was all a game, and he wished, with everything he had, that it truly was. But as the hours passed, the silence surrounding them didn't bring peace. It brought tension. The wait was the worst part, because Henry knew they were coming, and they wouldn't send warnings. They'd come to erase evidence. On Friday afternoon, the drone appeared, a faint buzz, barely noticeable. Nora saw it first, between the trees. Small, tactical, undetectable by civilian radar. Henry grabbed his rifle, took a single shot, and dropped it from the sky. It hit the rocks with a dull thud. Inside, a GPS tracker. They'd been marked, and now, officially, hunted. "How much time do you think we've got?" Nora asked. Henry didn't answer. He just looked up at the clouded sky and said, "Enough to prep the field." He walked behind the cabin, pulled back a tarp, and uncovered an old generator covered in moss. Beneath it, a metal crate filled with flares, proximity mines, and a folder with aerial photographs he had taken himself years ago, back when this place was just an escape plan. He had always known this day might come. That night, while Lily slept behind a locked bedroom door, Henry and Nora dug strategic holes around the perimeter. They set traps, reinforced entryways, blocked off paths. There were no guarantees, but they had preparation and memory. What Henry had learned over decades of war hadn't been forgotten, just stored away. And in the last hole he dug, he found something unexpected, an old silver pendant buried with the shredded remains of a military shirt. It had belonged to his daughter, the same one she wore as a child. He closed his eyes for a moment. There was no running from this. Not anymore. The question wasn't if they would come. It was how many, and how many would leave. That night, Henry didn't sleep, because he knew that when the next day dawned, he would no longer be just the old man on the porch. He'd become the man no one should have dared to wake. The day broke far too quietly. No birdsong, no wind rustling the leaves, not even the soft trickle of the stream that usually cut its way through the stones. It was as if the entire forest was holding its breath. Henry was already dressed. His old tactical vest strapped on, boots laced tight around his ankles, holster secured at his waist with the automatic rhythm of someone who still remembered the steps of a mission. Nora watched him from across the room. Her face was tired, but her eyes were sharp. She wasn't just an analyst anymore. She was an ally. And they both knew the next few hours would decide everything. For the first time, Lily didn't ask any questions. When Henry handed her a small flashlight and a supply kit, she simply nodded. She knew this wasn't a game. Her grandfather led her down to the cabin's basement, where he had built a makeshift hiding spot behind an old cabinet. "Stay here. Don't come out unless it's me or Nora. If you hear noise, don't scream. Just wait. I'll come back for you." She hugged him tight. "You're my hero, Grandpa." He didn't answer. He just held her small hand for a few extra seconds, feeling the warmth of the one person left in the world who still gave him a reason to keep fighting. At 7:23 a.m., the first sign, a shadow between the pines. Henry watched through binoculars from the window. This wasn't a lost hunter. It was someone in formation. Then came the second, and the third. The pattern was clear. Pincer approach. 3 flanks. Silent cover. Military training, but not army. This was off the books. Paramilitary. Hired hands sent to erase trails. Upstairs, Nora was monitoring intercepted comms, voices exchanging codes. Target confirmed. Invasion in 15 minutes. They had no idea they were being listened to. Henry activated the perimeter traps. Buried stakes, tripwires, and non-lethal containment charges. enough to disorient and destabilize. And it worked. The first intruder hit a tripwire and triggered a cloud of smoke. Startled, the second stumbled, and the third instinctively pulled back. That's when Henry slipped out of the cabin like a ghost, using the low sun as cover, moving with the weightless precision of someone who'd done this 100 times before. 1, 2, 3 steps, a sharp elbow, a shoulder lock, the thud of a body hitting the ground. The first man was down. On the other side of the cabin, Nora exchanged fire with another intruder trying to break in through the rear. The wooden frame of the window splintered, but she held her position, falling back and luring him into the pressure trap Henry had rigged under the table. When the man stepped inside, the sensor tripped. Flash, noise, confusion. In seconds, the ambush unraveled into chaos. But they weren't alone. A second support unit emerged from the northern flank. 2 more men. One carried a silenced weapon and was approaching the basement. Henry spotted him from the side of the house and ran. He didn't shout, didn't shoot. He grabbed the wooden cane he'd once kept as a memento of his daughter, and with a swift swing, blocked the advance. The cane, once a symbol of retirement, became his shield. The intruder dropped. Henry didn't hesitate. He zip-tied the man's wrists and moved on. The entire fight lasted just over 8 minutes, but it felt like forever. When it was done, 5 men were unconscious. 1 had a broken leg, 2 were dazed, and 1 was running down the trail toward the road, with Nora right behind him. When silence finally returned, Henry made his way back to the basement. He opened the cabinet. Lily was still there, eyes wide with tears, holding the supply kit to her chest. He knelt down, aching, but calm. "Is it over?" she whispered. "For now," he said, "but we're okay." The next day, Nora handed over the evidence to the Department of Justice. Recordings, seized equipment, and documents linking the attackers to a private network operating under the protection of retired Pentagon officials. People who profited from chaos and silenced anyone who got too close. The video from the bank had already been scrubbed from the internet for national security reasons, but that didn't matter anymore. What Henry had brought to the world wasn't a viral video. It was the truth. With Nora's help, Henry and Lily assumed new identities. They were relocated to a small coastal town where no one knew their names. There, Henry opened a modest furniture restoration shop. Peace, the sea, the scent of varnish, and coffee with biscuits every morning. But every night, when he closed up, he locked the front door with 2 turns of the key and kept the wooden cane close to his workbench, just in case, for memory's sake. Because some part of him knew that even in peace, the past never fully disappears. If this story moved you, share it. Tell us what hit you hardest in the comments, and check out the next video on your screen. Because sometimes the greatest warriors don't wear uniforms. They carry silence and courage and